So we are well into my most favorite time of the year, the spooky season. I'm your host, Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. Today we're going to delve into weird burial customs, odd gravestones, and those who are curiously interred.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Before we jump into the world of funeral fun, let's take a look at the calendar. Today's Monday, October 25th. This is a good day. International Artists' Day.
Oh, yeah.
Artists of all kinds are celebrated around the world today, as it is the International Artists' Day. On this day, we can and should honor and recognize all of the artists who enrich our lives and society in so many ways. It is important to recognize the contributions of artists around the world. It certainly makes sense that this should be an international event, always celebrated on October 25th. You know, my daughter is an art teacher, and she's very talented. She didn't get it from me. I don't know where it came from, but it didn't come from me.
Did you buy her a gift for International Artist Day?
You know, I think I'll have to run out and shop for one and see if I can find a brush.
A paintbrush.
Now, maybe, or this might be a good gift for her. Coming up this Saturday, October 30th, National Candy Corn Day.
Hey, I can get behind that. I like candy corn.
I do too. I like them as well.
Not everybody does, though.
Right. Candy corn was originally called chicken feed. Probably good that they changed the name, don't you think?
Yeah.
We'd still eat it.
Yeah, true.
That's true. It was invented in the 1880s by George Renninger and first manufactured by the Wonderly Candy Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The original way to make candy corn was to pour each color separately into molds. It took a very long time, but today, I love this. The Jelly Belly factory has a machine that can produce 12,000 kernels per second. Boy, there's some good old American know-how for you. Candy corn consists primarily of corn, syrup, honey, and sugar. Actually, I said it should have been corn syrup, not just corn syrup, but corn syrup, honey, and sugar.
How sweet it is.
It consists of corn.
Yeah, corn. It does.
Syrup.
There is corn in it. There is corn in there.
We're just going to let that hang there for a second.
Corn syrup. Or corn syrup. Worldwide, over 35 million pounds or 9 billion pieces are consumed annually. So, happy Candy Corn Day.
A lot of that's going on in my house.
Well, of course, October 31st is Halloween. I also want to wish happy birthday to my son-in-law, Easy, the bodybuilder. Happy birthday, Philip. And then next Thursday, November the 5th. I have a lot of these in my family. National Redhead Day.
Hey, I have a lot of those in my family, too.
National Redhead Day seeks to show support for redheads. This day encourages redheads to be themselves and feel happy about their unique hair color. National Redhead Day was started in 2015 by redhead sisters Adrienne and Stephanie Vendetti. The idea for this day came after 4 years of their website, How to Be a Redhead, was formed. The Vendetti sisters initially created the site to help fellow redheads discover their beauty and find comfort in their red hair. You know, it's unfortunate sometimes redheaded kids get teased, but I always think red hair is very attractive.
I do too.
My sister's redheaded, and 2 of my wild girl cousins are redheaded. So,
wild girl cousins.
Well, including Melanie, the one that convinced me to stand out and practice as her
barrel racing, right?
Be her barrel.
The barrel. Yeah,
be her
that's
barrel.
Wild.
Well, all right. Let's jump into our stories now. In 1993, a country singer named Joe Duffy had a hit song called Prop Me Up Beside the Jukebox If I Die. Remember this song?
I do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
The chorus had the line, fill my boots up with sand, put a stiff drink in my hand.
I love the accent, too.
Ouch.
And another verse has the wonderful, respectful sentiment, just make your next selection while you're still in line. You can pay your last respects 1 quarter at a time. Well, as hilarious as these words are, they do capture the sentiment of people who want a different kind of end-of-life ritual. Today, we are going to put the fun in funeral by examining the curiously interred. And believe me, there's no shortage of material here. Our biggest problem was cutting things down.
It really was.
We're going to really run
We had a
quite
lot.
long. Yeah. I'm sure that we have all at one time or another attended a traditional funeral, complete with the casket and pallbearers and mournful music, followed by a long procession to a cemetery for a few final words before the burial. But more and more today, people are looking for different options. Now, we recently on our show in one of our oddities talked about the practice of having your loved one's cremains encased in bio-friendly concrete and used to help form an ocean reef. And this really is seen by many to be a more meaningful way to say goodbye to the dearly departed.
Right.
So rather than just the expense that funerals have become, do something different.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, let's look at some funeral customs from around the world. Different countries. From Mental Floss, we find a really interesting article by Amanda Green called 12 Strange Funerals and Funeral Traditions. And we won't go into all of them, but here are some of the more interesting ones. In Taiwan, it's not uncommon to hire strippers as part of the funeral service.
Oh, okay.
The idea is that the strippers might appease wandering spirits that might be lurking about, and they also serve to liven up the service.
I bet.
While they don't strip completely down to their birthday suits, they aren't shy about jumping on caskets or dancing with the mourners. If that's a little too much for you, families can also hire an all-female marching band to accompany the funeral procession. The band members are all wearing mini skirts and go-go boots. No wonder the Chinese want that island back. Now, looking over in Europe, in the Netherlands, some families hire professional funeral clowns.
Now, I'm not sure I even like this better. Like,
That's
between
not
the two?
no, I'll take the go-go boots.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally different. That's a totally different thing on a funeral.
I guess so.
Oh.
The clowns liven up the proceedings by means of squirting flowers or making balloon animals. For a few extra euros, one clown will break wind during particularly tedious or solemn parts of the memorial. So you can even get paid for that.
Suddenly, there's more.
Is that going to
There's
be
more
your side
funerals
hustle?
being happened. Just to line up the extra coffins.
Right.
Phil, I think you could get a job done.
I just like that you can get paid for that. Is pretty hilarious.
Woo.
Anyway, in Madagascar, it's common to dig families up. I'm sorry. Let me start over
Dig
there.
families up.
Now, let's start over with that. In Madagascar, it's common for families to dig up their dead relatives for family reunions and other celebrations. The tradition is called, this is Famadihaana.
He's not dead yet.
The dead are walked through the village and take part in dances with family members.
Oh, no.
Then they are given new clean clothes and reburied. You know,
I think I've seen this. Like, they put a drink in their hand,
Right.
cigarette in their mouth. I think I've seen pictures of
Lean
it.
them up against the jukebox.
right? It could be.
And their boots,
Can you
yeah.
imagine afterwards, people are saying, Uncle John didn't look so good this year. You know?
No, he looked
I hope
natural.
he's okay. Some,
We couldn't find Aunt Betty this time?
right?
Oh, moving on.
Some Mongolian and Tibetan cultures are famous for practicing sky burials,
Right.
placing the body of the deceased on a high, unprotected place to be consumed by wildlife and the elements. This is part of the Buddhist belief, which teaches that respecting the body after death is needless.
I had a completely different idea from that. I'm sorry. Something about throwing them over the plane?
No. No.
No, not from the plane, but that could have a similar effect, I suppose, too.
No, I think this is more like a circle of life thing. It kind of is. It's very reverent, I think. It's very...
Put them up, let them return,
Yes.
let them return from whence they came.
One thing, okay, so we're in the Houston area. There is a funeral museum in the Houston area. And
We're really in the cut and shoot area, but go ahead.
right.
The great.
And
Greater
so
cut and shoot
the
area.
greater,
Greater cut and shoot
it's
area.
very greater.
Yeah.
cut and shoot. So I went, and one of the things that fascinated me about funeral customs was the Japanese. So they cremate a lot of times, but there's a
Right.
lot of bone fragments left, and the family will stand around. Okay, so in order they put the ashes in the urn,
Right.
but the bone fragments that are left, they pick out with chopsticks, and they have to put them in the urn, like the feet bones and then the leg bones, like in order.
How do they know which are which?
I guess education. I don't know. I guess doing that, you figure it out. But that's something I heard.
Maybe they go through where the cremation actually takes place.
Oh, you know what? That's probably that makes a whole lot more sense. But then they do that, and that's the way that they put the remains.
Crematory.
Yeah, okay. in the urn.
Well, at least they go in feet first.
That's right. They're standing up in the urn.
Speaking of feet first, that kind of fits into something we're going to come to in a little bit. From thoughtco.com, let's talk a little bit about some ancient rituals that may still have traces left today. There's some interesting articles about cemeteries and funeral rituals. One particular one, written by a lady named Kimberly Powell, states that many early burial rites and customs were practiced to protect the living by appeasing the spirits who were thought to have caused the person's death. Such ghost protection rituals and superstitions have varied extensively with time and place, as well as with religious perception, but many are still in use today. The custom of shutting the eyes of the deceased is believed to have begun this way, done in an attempt to close a, quote, window from the living world to the spirit world. Covering the face of the deceased with a sheet comes from the pagan belief that the spirit of the deceased escapes through the mouth. In 19th century Europe and America, the dead were carried out of the house feet first, just as you were saying, Phil, in order to prevent the spirit from looking back into the house and beckoning another member of the family to follow him. Mirrors were also covered, usually with black crepe, so that the soul would not get trapped and be left unable to pass to the other side. Some cultures took the fear of ghosts to an extreme. The Saxons of early England cut off the feet of their dead so that the corpse would be unable to walk. Some Aboriginal tribes took even more unusual step of cutting off the head of the dead, thinking it would leave the spirit too busy searching for his head to worry about the living. I can't be bothered haunting you. I'm trying to find my head.
Yeah, tell the Headless Horseman in Sleepy Hollow that he's still haunted the place.
Powell also writes that many modern cemetery rituals come from the ancients. The use of tombstones may go back to the belief that ghosts could be weighed down. We're going to hold you down there with this rock, ghost. Don't you try and come around here. I thought this was interesting. Mazes found at the entrance to many ancient tombs are thought to have been constructed to keep the deceased from returning to the world as a spirit, since it was believed that ghosts could only travel in a straight line.
Hey.
What kind of whippy ghost is that? Can't turn corners, can't go through walls? Well, anyway. Some people even considered it necessary for the funeral procession to return to the graveside by a different path from the one taken in with the deceased, so that the departed ghost wouldn't be able to follow them home. So quick, let's duck down by the bakery. We won't be able to know where we are.
So they're stuck at the donut shop.
I guess so. In many cemeteries, the vast majority of graves are oriented in such a manner that the bodies lie with their heads to the west and their feet to the east. This very old custom appears to originate with the pagan sun worshippers, but is primarily attributed to Christians who believe that the final judgment or final summons to judgment will come from the east.
That's right. That's right. I knew about that one.
Now, one of the most interesting cemeteries that I've ever visited, my wife and I were staying in the beautiful little quiet seaside town of Whitby, England, Whitby, a couple of years ago. Whitley was the home of a massive Catholic cathedral. But you know that Henry VIII, he declared himself the head of the new Church of England. He took possession of all Catholic properties, including the Whitby Abbey, which now only remains in glorious ruins. It's really the coolest thing to go see. In fact, it's thought to have been the inspiration for Dracula, the ruins at Whitby. Anyway, in the 1560s, a new church was built, and the surrounding cemetery that's there dates from that time. It's located on top of a hill overlooking the city and the North Sea. The tombstones are sticking out of the ground in all angles, just askew every which way. Some are still legible. There's a stair-step walkway that leads from the town up to the cemetery. And about every 40 steps or so, there is a longer landing between the steps and a long bench. A long bench is provided. This is known as the coffin bench. You see, it's a lot of work to haul your buddy's carcass up that hill, so...
Give the pallbearers a place to sit and rest.
Built-in rest areas allowed them to set the coffin down and take a little breather. Now, speaking of England, Queen Victoria.
Oh, yeah. She was the source of a lot of...
Exactly.
rituals.
This is another thoughtcode.com article written by Patty Wigington. Details the influence that England's Queen Victoria had on public mourning. In 1861, the death of Queen Victoria's beloved husband, Prince Albert, stunned the world. Only 42 years old, Albert had been ill for 2 weeks before finally taking his last breath. His widow would remain on the throne for another 40 years, and his death pushed the Queen into such intense grief that it changed the course of the world for the rest of her reign until 1901. England and many other places adopted unusual death and funerary practices, all of which were influenced by Victoria's very public mourning of the late Prince Albert. Thanks to Queen Victoria, grief and mourning became quite fashionable. Some examples of Victorian-era mourning are as follows. First of all, death photography.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the years after the U.S. Civil War, the 1860s, photography was becoming more affordable, more refined, and more popular. Families could afford to have a professional photographer visit their home and take a family portrait. So naturally, the people of the Victorian age found a way to tie this into their fascination with death. Death photography soon became a very popular trend for many families. It was the first and only opportunity to get a photograph with a loved one, particularly if the deceased was a child.
Right.
Families often had photos taken of bodies lying in coffins or in the beds in which the person had passed away. In fact, it wasn't uncommon to have a photograph taken which included the dead person propped up among the surviving family members. This trend became known as memento mori. It's a Latin phrase that means, remember, you must die.
Right. And there's so many of those photographs out there.
Right.
And you can tell. Okay, so if there's many people in the photograph, sometimes the photographer would kind of draw eyes.
Right. They were trying to draw eyes.
And so, to make them look like they're alive, like this photograph was made before the person died. But the way you can tell is that everybody that is alive is a little bit blurrier than the person that is dead, because it took a long time to take that photograph.
Right. They were a long exposure. You had to stand really still.
That's right.
Which I guess that would be an advantage to the corpse there, because they were already going to be still.
So they came out very crisp and clean. Right.
All right, hold your breath.
Now, another one that came out of that period is called death jewelry. The Victorians were big fans of memorializing their dead in ways, well, that might seem to be a little off-putting to us today.
You think? I'm not a fan of this one.
Death jewelry was a popular way to commemorate the recently deceased. Hair was clipped from a corpse and then turned into brooches and lockets. In fact, in some case, it was used as an adornment on a photograph of the departed. You'd have the person's picture in a little locket and some of their actual hair in there.
But the thing about it is that the hair wasn't just there. Like, it was very ornately crafted.
Right. It was a lot of hair.
And in all kinds of different ways. And you know, I can appreciate that, but
And you think if the spirit was mad.
Right.
It's like, I got here and half my hair's gone.
Right. Now, one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I always learn new things too, and I had never heard of this before. Grave dolls were a popular way for parents and siblings to remember a lost child. If the family could afford it, a life-size wax effigy of the child was made and dressed in the deceased's clothing.
A little creepy.
Yeah, and then displayed at the funeral.
Yeah, I find that creepy too.
Sometimes these were left at the gravesite, but often they were brought home and kept in a place of honor in the family's home. Wax dolls of deceased infants were even kept in cribs, and their clothes were changed regularly. By the 1870s, death kits were available for little girls' dolls, complete with coffins and mourning clothes as a means of helping to train girls for participating in and even guiding death rituals and their attendant grief. In addition, little girls prepared for their eventual roles as the family mourners by staging elaborate funerals for their dolls and, quote, playing burial rites.
You know, all of this seems really odd, because I think that in today's modern society, we are so separated from death.
Right.
But my mother-in-law she tells me about the time, she was the oldest of all of her siblings.
Right.
And she got to participate in preparing her grandmother's body for burial. So with her aunts and her mother, she got to participate in that, and she's 9 years old at that time.
I remember hearing some of my older relatives talk about that as well. You would even do it on the kitchen table.
Right. This was all done in their home, and she braided her grandmother's hair, and she she was a little freaked out about it as a child, but she was very it's a memory that she cherishes now.
Has, yeah. Interesting. The people were much more. There were funeral directors. Maybe were not as common, and people were. It was more of a do-it-yourself burials in those days.
That's right.
Professional mourners, for people of the Victorian period, it was important that they publicly show their grief with lots of crying and mournful expressions. However, a great way to demonstrate one's grief was to hire even more people to be sad for the deceased, and that's where paid mourners came in. Victorian professional mourners were called mutes, and they walked silently behind a hearse dressed in black and looking grim. Now, once motorized vehicles arrived on the scene and hearses had engines instead of horses, the job of professional mourner mostly went by the wayside, although some cultures do retain the service of paid mourners today.
Hey, listen, if you need to, I'm your girl. I will show up at a funeral, stand in the back, dress all in black, look mysterious. Just hit me up. Wasn't there a story in the case in the New Testament about the girl who had died, and the father came to find Jesus to come help her, and when he got there, there were professional mourners there. Yeah, that's right.
That's been going on a long time. Now, during the Victorian era, when a family member died, the worshippers stopped all the clocks in the house at the death hour.
Yeah, what was that about? I knew about that, but I don't know why.
A tradition that originated in Germany. It was believed that if the clocks weren't stopped, there would be bad luck for the rest of the family. There's also the theory that by stopping the time, at least temporarily, it would allow the spirit of the deceased to move on, rather than sticking around and haunt his or her survivors. Stopping clocks also had a practical application, as that it allowed the family to provide a time of death for the coroner on the event that one was called to sign a death certificate.
Yeah, and that kind of stopped in the 1980s when everyone's VCR just flashed 12.
12. I think it was 12 o'clock when he died.
Oh, there was that time that everything had a clock. Right. Everything.
And that didn't work.
Yeah.
It always flashed 12.
Right. Now, Queen Victoria wore black mourning dresses for the rest of her life, 40 years, and always wore black. Most Victorians didn't wear black for quite that long, but there were certain protocols. A widow was expected to wear black for at least 2 years, and they remained socially isolated for at least a year after their husband's death. A widower would also wear a black suit and top hat, but there was a bit of a double standard in place, as it was understood that if there were children still at home, he might have to marry sooner rather than later.
Okay, so, right. Okay, I knew about that, but here's the thing. Like, wouldn't a woman need to marry in order to be taken care of? But who knows?
Had a different way of looking at that, I guess.
Okay, so we record this in advance, okay? So by this time, our cemetery scavenger hunt, the Cemetery Crawl 2021, should be over and a winner chosen.
It was so much fun.
Oh, yeah. Ooh. Okay, but I'm going to talk about cemetery symbols, specifically the ones that were involved in our symbol scavenger hunt. So the first one, and I got this my information from littlethings.com as well as funeralhelp.com.
Funeralhelp.com.
That's right.
That's a good website.
And I think it was there to, I didn't look at the whole website, but I think it was there to help you decide what you wanted. Yeah, what kind of funeral and tombstones and things like that. So our first symbol is a log or a stump.
I've seen these. Yeah.
I have too. And they were mostly popular from the 1880s to the 1920s. The tree stump stones were part of a movement to turn the focus of death back to life, kind of like a circle of life thing. It calls to mind the Bible's tree of life or tree of knowledge in Genesis. And the organization Woodmen of the World, a service society founded in 1890 based in Omaha, Nebraska, adopted this type of monument for their deceased members. So probably there's a whole lot more around Nebraska.
I've seen them here in Texas, though.
Oh, I have too. Okay, so the second one is a lamb. The lamb signifies purity, and sadly, it's often on a child's grave.
Right. Yeah.
It could be a baby, child, or even a young adult, someone who has died way too soon. I know that my uncle, when he died at 19, his tombstone has a lamb on it. So the Masonic compass, that's pretty standard. As far as understanding, the square encompasses the single most identifiable symbol of Freemasonry, and when you see it on a gravestone, it signifies simply that that person was a member. And then we have the obelisk, which isn't really a symbol. Well, it is a symbol. It's not a symbol carved in it, but It's a shape of a monument. It's said to represent a single ray of sunlight. And its popularity in the 1840s and 50s reflected a cultural interest in the architecture of Egypt.
Right, because the obelisks were used there.
Absolutely. This next one I found interesting. Clasping hands. So when found on a gravestone, you need to look at the cuffs of the two hands and take note if they are the same or if they're different. So you're making the distinction whether the two hands are of the same person
or different hands
or of two different people. So if the two hands have matching cuffs, they look identical, they typically represent a farewell or goodbye to earthly life or a greeting of welcome to eternal life. But if the cuffs are different, it may signify any of the following: a close emotional bond or spiritual bond between individuals or partners such as husband and wife, mother and child, despite their separation by death, the continuity of love and affection, or guidance of the deceased to heaven by loved ones who have gone on before. I like that one.
That's good. Okay.
Then we have the Alpha and Omega symbols.
Right.
In a historic cemetery, you'll sometimes see the Alpha engraved on one side of a memorial and Omega on the other, but sometimes you will see them together or even intertwined. I've seen that. Symbolically, Alpha and Omega stand for God, who created the beginning, the end, and everything in between.
Beginning and the end, right?
He is the Alpha and Omega. And then we have the Celtic cross, or knotwork. The Celtic cross is a cross that features a circle around the intersection of the arms and stem. It is associated with Gaelic cultures and has a few different interpretations, but mostly the added circle symbolizes eternity.
Right.
These crosses often feature knotwork, which also symbolizes eternity and its endless looping.
Okay. I've seen that.
Okay, and have you seen the open book?
Yeah, I thought it said the end on it, but...
No.
Okay.
These were often carved into the headstones of clergy or church ministers.
Okay.
And were also found on the gravestones of devoutly religious people. In those cases, it was understood to be the Bible, Quran, or the Book of Life.
Right.
It also symbolizes it could also symbolize a person's love for literature. And represent his good deeds and accomplishments in life.
I see.
So the hourglass is one that you don't see modernly. It's an older one. And when it appears on a grave, it's a reminder that life is short and that you should make the most of your time here. And often it's shown with wings, indicating that time flies, that life is fleeting, and that afterlife is eternal.
Or with a $sign that time is money.
I haven't seen that, but I bet it's out there somewhere.
Probably somewhere out there.
And then a lot of tombstones will have gates on them. Okay. It denotes the passage from earth into heaven. When these gates are incorporated into a gravestone design, it's an assurance that the person will walk through the pearly gates and find peace on the other side. Okay. So the gates are usually open.
Open gates.
And then this one was our bonus symbol because it's kind of hard to find nowadays. You have to really look usually into a very old cemetery. It's the winged skull or the memento mori.
Yeah, we mentioned memento mori just a minute ago. So.
That's right. So winged skull or the words memento mori. The winged skull was very popular during the 17th and 18th centuries. The basic skull symbol denotes death and mortality, while the wings symbolize ascension into heaven. They also signify the fleeting nature of life. Like, tombstones back then wanted to remind the living, that you're going to die too.
Yeah, don't forget, you have to die.
And so, and as you mentioned, memento mori is Latin for remember, that you're going to die. The use of these symbols of mortality on gravestones became popular in Europe during the 15th, 16th centuries, and reminds people not to become too flippant of life or too triumphant in military victories.
Oh, okay, that's a good one.
Okay, so going to, there's plants and there's trees in cemeteries that if you visit a lot of graveyards, you might start to notice that there's certain ones that seem to pop up in these places. And so from this article of talkdeath.com, we find that there's certain trees and plants that have unique folklore and ties to human spirituality and superstition.
Okay.
So 3 of them, I'm going to just talk about 3 of the trees. Yew trees.
Y-E-W.
Y-E-W. Feature in many European graveyards. They are known for their ability to thrive in almost any soil condition and can withstand harsh weather. Uh-huh. This is why many yew trees have lived for thousands of years.
Right.
And if you look up, cemetery yew trees, there's some that are just huge that have been carved out of. I mean, they're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing. Much of the yew tree is poisonous. Its leaves, bark, and while the flesh of the berry is not toxic, its seed most definitely is. So perhaps the funeral tradition, nobody really knows, but there was a funeral tradition of carrying branches of yew in a funeral procession, tucking them into the casket of the deceased and cultivating of the tree on the cemetery grounds. Maybe that was a way to keep animals away.
Oh, okay.
It did serve to to make farmers super aware of keeping their livestock out of graveyards, and so preserved the grounds.
I think yew trees are used in cancer research as well, in making cancer drugs.
Oh, that's interesting. I had no idea.
That same poison, I've heard of that.
Okay, so cypress trees, I have a lot around my house, and I don't particularly like them. They have a lot of knots, a lot of knees.
Knees,
that,
right.
Yeah,
Cypress
the roots
knees.
come up, yeah.
They grow on the river where I grew up, too.
The cypress became a lauded cemetery tree thanks to its appearance, which inspired folklore. So cypress trees were thought to look gloomy and often would be planted near graves or in the front yard of a home as a warning against outsiders entering a place corrupted by a dead body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, pretty sinister trees. And then the last one is the eastern red cedar. And then there's some sinister superstitions concerning this. Of course, the color red.
Right.
But there's an old Ozark superstition that if a red cedar you plant grows tall enough to shade your grave, you will die. So also it is, but how fast does a tree grow? Honestly, I
don't know. I've seen cemeteries around our area here in East Texas that have red cedars in them.
Right.
Old cemeteries.
Also, it was considered bad luck to bring any of the cedar's branches into the house for fear of bad luck. The one exception was at Christmas time, but it absolutely had to be removed by Epiphany, which was January 6th. Okay. So planting this tree in a cemetery makes sense in that it was a hardy tree associated already with death. So the next time you walk through an old cemetery, see if you can spot some of those trees.
Thank you, Leah. Those are really interesting things about cemeteries. I really enjoy walking through old cemeteries, and it's nice to know what some of those symbols mean.
Now for today's bookshop spot, the part of the show where we take you on a virtual tour of one of the most magical of places, an independent bookshop.
Our bookshop spot today is Bridgeside Books, located at 29 Stowe Street in Waterbury, Vermont. Boy, does that just sound lovely. Love Vermont. I've never been to Vermont, have you?
I have not, but I'd love to visit it in the autumn.
It's always so beautiful in the pictures. Bridgeside Books has been in operation since 2009, but current owner Kataya D'Angelo bought the store just last year. According to Kataya, we aim to be a place to find ways to engage your brain. So we have strategic board games, art supplies, and puzzles.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah. But that is a really bad time to have bought a bookstore.
Well, I think it's working out for them, though.
Well, good.
In addition to books and book accessories and tea. Now, there you go. I like that.
Yeah.
It would be nice to be in Vermont in the fall in front of a nice fireplace with a good book and a cup of tea.
That's right.
Well, that sounds like it'd be fun. We also have a wall and doorway. We also share a wall and doorway with a lovely cafe next door that's separately owned, but obviously goes really well with us. So you got your nice bookshop and your cafe.
Okay, we're adding this to our road trip.
Right there.
Yeah.
Now, I looked at their website, and they offer numerous books from Vermont authors. And not being really familiar with Vermont authors, I thought a couple of these really caught my attention. One was called 360 Degrees, A Guide to Vermont's Fire and Observation Towers, produced by the Green Mountain Club.
We used to have those around here.
Yeah,
when I moved out here in the 80s, there were a lot of fire towers.
Fire towers, right. And they're still there in Vermont. And
but we call them fire towers.
Yes, right. Well, never mind how we pronounce things around here. Another was a children's book called Brave Little Finn by Jennifer Churchman, which is about a lamb who was raised in a farmhouse but then had to face the big world outside. Sounds like a pretty exciting children's book.
I thought you were going to say had to face the sun. What a children's book.
I have a fondness for
sheep.
sheep.
It goes with the show.
Yeah. Anyway, their building is from the 1880s. And is next to a bridge that goes over railroad tracks that connects to New York and further south. Hence the name Bridgeside Books. They're next to a bridge. Anyway,
I was going to ask.
There you go. It was a bargain general store in the 1883, but in the 1930s it was a candlepin bowling alley.
Oh wow!
Now I had never heard of a candlepin bowling. Have you?
No.
Not sure I have.
It's evidently, I looked it up, and it's a candlepin means it's a kind of a bowling that they played in eastern Canada and in New England. The pins are shaped straight up and down, and they look like candlesticks almost, just straight up and down pins rather than the bulbous shape that we know. They're narrow, and Anyway, Kataya says that they are not aware of any ghosts, but we do have a part-time store dog named Ralph. That's a good name for a dog, Ralph.
Yep.
Ralph.
He's only here under strict supervision as he loves to greet people by running at them. Well, might cut down on your business a little bit. See a dog running at you when you come in. Anyway, we also have a 1942 Royal typewriter that we use to type up shelf talkers. We're in the process of naming it. Audrey and Doris are the top running names currently. I think if it's a Royal typewriter, it should be Elizabeth, don't you think?
No, I'm my vote is for Audrey. I like that.
You could go Victoria. I mean,
yeah, Victoria. Yeah, it's true. We've been talking about Victoria in this episode. If you're not fortunate enough to visit to be able to visit Vermont in person, then please check out their website www.bridgesidebooks.com, and they are also on Facebook.
All right.
nice.
Okay, so back to our Curiously Entoured. We're going to talk about some odd tombstones.
That sounds like fun.
And like I said, we had to really cut this down. We had so much material. But this one is interesting. So having to bury a loved one is hard, but having to bury a child is
It's got to be really the hardest thing, I think, for people.
So that's what one mother faced when her 10-year-old little girl, Florence Irene Ford, passed away from yellow fever back in 1871. So, yellow fever was such a big thing.
Right.
Florence's mother was distraught in her grief and could not face the idea of not being able to comfort Florence during the thunderstorms that she was so afraid of in life. So she had a rather unique idea. Florence's small little grave looks at first glance to be perfectly normal. There's a headstone with a wreath of sweet flowers carved into it, along with a footstone with a vase on top to hold live flowers.
So far, so good.
But behind the grave, however, is a steel door in the ground, covering a staircase leading down 6 feet to the base of the grave. Florence's mother had a window installed in the concrete wall right where the head of the casket would be, so that when storms rolled through the area, she could go down, sit beside Florence, and lovingly comfort her, just as she has always done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Heartbreaking.
The grave is located in Natchez City Cemetery in Mississippi. The only thing that has changed over the years is that the windows now paved over with cement. That was done back in the 50s to prevent vandalism, but the stairs are still there, and visitors often leave little toys there for Florence. And so I got my info on that grave from boardpanda.com. Okay, so this next one is, it's weird. In a Salt Lake City, Utah cemetery, there's a tombstone that has carved on it, Lily E. Gray, June 6, 1881 to November 14th, 1958. Victim of the Beast, 666.
Really? What?
Oh.
Hold on.
So no one really knows the definitive story about this, but of course there are all kinds of rumors about Lily being a witch and so on. Nothing much is known about Lily. She led a pretty quiet life, but we do know that she married late in life. When they were both in their 70s, Lily got married to a man named Elmer Gray. We do know a lot more about Elmer.
I see.
It seems that he was a notorious criminal who did time for robbery. The paper trail documenting Elmer's criminal history shows he was really a paranoid man with anti-government sentiment.
Okay.
He insisted that so he did some time, for robbery, but according to him, he didn't do time. He was kidnapped by the government.
I see. They were holding me against my will.
Yeah, and he had a lot of run-ins with local authorities. And there's no word that it says it, but it's generally believed that he was paranoid schizophrenic.
I would think so.
So he was very upset that he was not allowed to ride in the ambulance with Lily when she had the pulmonary embolism that eventually killed her. Perhaps the gravestone he had made reflects that he thought the government killed Lily, like they were taking her away. And
And the beast representing
the
the
beast
actual
was
government.
the government. Yeah,
That's right. It's hard to know exactly what he was thinking.
Sure.
But one other subtle reference to the devil are the flowers carved on Lily's tombstone. They are evening primroses, which I love evening primroses. They're one of the wildflowers that grow here.
Right.
And I didn't know this, but they're also called devil's lantern.
Oh, I've never heard that either.
Lily's grave is the most popular in the cemetery, with many visitors leaving coins on her grave.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this next one's funny. A July 1908 article in a newspaper local to Goldfield, Nevada, reports about a post-mortem examination of an unknown man.
Okay.
The county physician found the dead man to be, quote, nearly starved, and as a result concluded that he had eaten the contents of a glass jar of library paste.
Oh, no. What a way to go.
The identity of the man was never determined, and so he was buried in Goldfield Pioneer Cemetery with a headstone that reads, "Unknown man died eating library paste." July 14th, 1908.
Very original.
That's worse than the underwear bomber.
Legend said that the man was a vagrant looking through the trash for a meal and unfortunately chose the wrong thing to eat. His tombstone is still readable, though, because somebody, and they don't know who, but somebody keeps painting over it with red paint, like painting the inscription in red.
Probably the tourist bureau of
But the moral of the story is don't eat glue, don't eat paste.
There you go.
Okay, so in the ghost town of St. Omer, the ghost town of St. Omer is located near Ashmore, Illinois, and it may have been completely forgotten except for a perplexing grave marker in its cemetery, the Barnes Monument. It's the subject of a local witch legend, which it seems like a lot of these are.
Yeah.
The stone monument, but I could see why this one is.
Yeah.
The stone monument was carved to look like a large sphere balanced on top of a pile of logs. The logs look like they could have been gathered for a campfire or a bonfire.
All right.
So while most of the other graves in the cemetery are oriented east-west, like you said, most graves are oriented east to west, this one faces north to south.
Uh-oh.
4 people are buried
crossways
there.
in the chute.
That's right. That's right. And so in old cemeteries, really old, because it doesn't matter so much nowadays, but even now, if you think of modern cemeteries, it's usually east to west.
Yeah.
But in really old cemeteries, if someone is not situated that way, they're usually an outsider.
A reputable person.
Yeah. Anyway, so this particular memorial has 4 graves at it. So there's Marcus Barnes and his wife Carolyn, who are commemorated on one side of the sphere, and Marcus's parents Granville and Sarah are located on the other, or inscribed on the other.
Okay.
So the sphere and the wood pyre are curious choices for a tombstone, but the most puzzling thing about the memorial is the date inscribed under Caroline's name. It shows that she was born on January 23rd, 1858, and that she died on February 31st, 1882.
31st. Well, okay,
that's right.
That's interesting dating there.
February 31st. So many rumors popped up about Caroline being a witch and being burned at the stake, which that's where, that would make sense with the wood.
Right, with the wood and the ball, yeah.
And that the sphere represented her crystal ball, and it said that she declared that she would rise again each year on her death date. So to prevent that from happening, an impossible date
will fix you.
That's right, was etched into her gravestone.
Yeah, there you go. Take
that. No one knows the real truth behind the mysterious date, but we do know that Marcus died in an unfortunate sawmill accident, and he was laid to rest near his parents. Presumably, the stone was already in place at that time since his parents had died a few years earlier. So just a few months after his death, 23-year-old Caroline died too. She succumbed to pneumonia on either the 26th or the 28th of February. The date inscribed on her stone was likely just a mistake. But there's no one left in the family to pay for it to be fixed. And in fact, by that time, there was no one hardly left in the town anymore.
Right.
The memory of the town has been kept alive only by Caroline's odd gravestone.
That's interesting.
This next one involves a sphere as well. The Merchant Ball grave, located in Marion Cemetery in Marion, Ohio. Right. The Merchant family was a prominent one, so it's no surprise that they erected a large and expensive monument in 1896 to mark the grave of Charles Merchant. The memorial features a square plinth or pedestal with a very large polished stone sphere placed on top.
Okay.
The sphere weighs approximately 5,200 pounds.
A circle globe on top of a square bottom. Okay.
That's right. But it was not secured to the base in any way.
Oh, just laying up there?
Yeah, it was
Could
just
like
put
roll
on
around?
top. Well, here's the thing. Okay, so it's 5,000 pounds. Is it going to roll around? They assumed it wouldn't, but in fact it does.
I would think so. It is round, you see.
Erosion does happen.
So the sphere was polished to a really fine shine, all except for where it sat on the plinth. There's there's a rough spot.
They thought that would be enough to keep it in place.
And it's that rough spot that signifies that's the only thing that tells people that it has moved is that over the years and for the next 2 years it moved so that you could see that rough spot. And and granted, this was back in the 1890s or the late 1890s. So I mean, it wasn't like trains and maybe there was a train nearby. I don't know. Maybe there was. Up, yeah. But okay, so the family noticed that it was. That way that it had spun, and so they hired a crane to lift it up, right it in the right way, and they put it back on there with a dollop of tar to kind of glue it in place.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it didn't.
No.
No, it didn't. It still spins, and when I say spins, like you can't go up and just spin it,
whack it and watch it go.
Right, but yeah. It's all in vain. All that trouble that they went to is all in vain because it still spins, showing its bald spot is what they call it. No one knows why it does that except for maybe imperceptible vibrations or perhaps ghostly intervention. Charles Merchant was the original Rolling Stone.
Oh, I'm picking up good vibration. Okay,
okay, wait a minute. That's not Rolling Stones.
I don't know. It's all that came to my mind at the moment.
Well, at least there wasn't a chain.
That's right.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
Okay, so our oddity today is about the Viking sunstone. We've kind of been on a kick lately about Norse and Vikings and all of that.
Right.
Vikings were well known to be fearsome conquerors and expert seamen. Their unmatched skills of navigation came from the intimate knowledge of landmarks, currents, and waves, but also relied heavily on the position of the sun by day and the stars at night.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many overcast and foggy days that rendered a sundial or sextant useless.
Yeah.
So
now what are you going to do?
Enter the legendary sunstone.
Sunstone.
There were stories that the Vikings had figured out how to locate the position of the sun even on the most overcast of days. A secret that they didn't care to share with anyone else. So the idea...
we know it, our secret.
Unable to be proven or reproduced, entered into Viking folklore until just recently. According to a 2007 article by Corey Benz at livescience.com, a team of scientists sailed the Arctic Ocean aboard the Swedish icebreaker Odin and tested their theories about the fabled Viking sunstone. They found that certain crystals such as cordierite, I think.
Cordierite, yeah.
Calcite and tourmaline have polarizing qualities that filter the sunlight in ever-changing brightness and color as they move it around and can actually detect the angle of the sun and so determine the sun's position in the sky. The way this
really
works,
had it then.
Dun, dun, dun.
One of the scientists explained, and it's kind of a very subtle thing, but one of the scientists explained how it works by saying, if you put a dot on top of the crystal and look through it from below, 2 dots will appear. Then you rotate the crystal until the 2 points have exactly the same intensity or darkness. So you have to really pay attention. At that angle, the upward-facing surface indicates the direction of the sun. A precision of a few degrees can be reached even under dark twilight conditions. Vikings would have been able to determine with precision the direction of the hidden sun.
Wow.
So, along with Vikings, birds and butterflies are also thought to use polarized light to orient themselves, along with other things like the
magnetic field. They carry those rocks around?
Yeah.
No, but I think they can see that. They can see that, whereas we can't.
I'm with you.
But anyway, I got my info from livescience.com as well as from phys.org. That's PHYS, like physics.org.
Okay. Phys, like PHYS.
Yeah, not FIZZ.
Okay.
That's a completely different site.
Yeah, totally different site.
And now for something really smashing.
Well, now back to our topic, and we were speaking a little bit earlier about Queen Victoria. Let's talk about some items that people wish to be buried with.
Because you can take it with you.
Yeah,
Not.
Well, these people tried, okay? They tried. From grunge.com, we found a great article by Kathy Benjamin titled Crazy Items Famous People Are Buried With. According to Benjamin, Queen Victoria had a list of items that she wanted to be buried with that ran for 12 pages. Now, of course, many of the items were things that belonged to her beloved husband, Prince Albert, who had died 40 years earlier. But she also was secretly buried with items belonging to another man.
No.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, it was her beloved servant, John Brown. Evidently, Victoria and Brown developed a close relationship in the years after Albert's death. Now, how close? Well, nobody knows for sure. But it was known that Victoria's children hated John Brown. And they would never agree to have any of his items buried with their mother. So the Queen entrusted the task to her physician, Dr. James Reed. Dr. Reed noted in his diary that he had secretly tucked Brown's items into the casket with Victoria's, according to her wishes. Now, here's some other interesting folks that have had interesting things buried with them. There's a lady named Sandra West. You may not have heard of her. She was a wealthy Beverly Hills socialite, and she had the good sense to marry a Texas oil tycoon and then outlive him by several years. She inherited millions and enjoyed spending that money on jewelry and other luxury items. But there was really only one item that she wanted to take to her grave. Her Ferrari.
Well, if you're going to drive in the afterlife.
That's right. You want to go with style. 5 years before West died in 1977, she wrote a will requesting to be buried, quote, next to my husband in my lace nightgown and in my Ferrari with the seat slanted comfortably. You know, because when you're rich, you can do whatever you want. Her bizarre wish was duly granted. Now, despite the funeral director's desire to make the funeral as, quote, unsensational as possible.
Right, with the Ferrari.
Like the Ferrari wasn't already there.
Right. About 300 media and curious onlookers showed up at a San Antonio cemetery in 1977 to watch as a giant crane lowered a huge box containing West and her 1964 Ferrari into the ground. The grave is 19 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 9 feet deep. Oh, yeah, and to deter any would-be thieves from trying to sneak off with the car, the hole was completely encased with cement.
Oh, wow. They just poured
cement. They dug the huge hole. We have a picture of the case being lowered into the hole.
Okay, what is it in a cement case or is it okay?
Well, I think it was in a like a wooden case. And that was all lowered into the hole, and then cement was poured all over.
Okay, I'm picturing the car filling up
with the icing on top, wouldn't it?
Cement.
Yeah, well,
cementing her in the seat.
It could be. I don't know.
Okay.
That was a stone cold thing.
Oh, now you remember the old movie called Some Like It Hot? It had Tony Curtis as one of the stars.
No.
Back in the 1960s, early 60s.
Yeah, that was before my time.
And Marilyn Monroe was in that movie. Yeah. Anyway, Tony Curtis was a famous movie actor, also father of Jamie Lee Curtis. He went to the great beyond with a seriously crowded coffin. Curtis, who died in 2010, shared his coffin with a travel bag full of photos and letters, a model of his car, driving gloves, some cash, his Navy medals, a pair of his grandson's baby shoes, a patch from Hungary, gold coins, 2 watches, a yarmulke, stones that he'd picked up on his travels, a DVD of clips from his favorite films, his iPhone, sunglasses, 7 packets of Splenda.
And you can still call him today.
A Percocet tablet, and a sleep mask, his dog's ashes, paintbrushes, paints, sketch pads, and a pen.
In case he got bored?
I guess so. Want to have it all with him. And he wore white shorts, his much-mended favorite white sweater, and an Armani scarf, as well as his well-worn Stetson under his arm.
Wow, that's...
Okay.
Yeah. Now, you may be familiar with the famous British writer of children's stories, Roald Dahl. His stories included James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Matilda. When he died in 1990, Dahl had specified that certain items be placed in his coffin. Understandably, he wanted his favorite pencils with him. You know, he was a writer. But he also wanted his favorite snooker cue sticks. And this was most curious. a power circular saw.
Okay. That's to get out.
Yes, he's going to do some...
He's going to break out.
Do some quick home
Was
improvement.
it battery powered?
But yeah, that's what I was at. Is it going to be like that doodlebug thing where he has an extension cord?
To the great beyond. I don't know if it lasts. I was going to plug
Hey,
it in.
St. Peter, plug this in.
Yeah, right. Got a little handiwork I want to do on my mansion here. Well,
wow.
Now there was another author you may not have heard of. His name was William S. Burroughs. Now, he was a counterculture hero back in the 1960s. Really an interesting character, to say the least. His first book was titled Confessions of an Unredeemed Drug Addict. He led a pretty wild life, and he relocated frequently, having lived in Mexico, Brazil, Paris, and Morocco before finally settling in Lawrence, Kansas.
Yeah, there you go.
When he died in 1997, he was buried with a joint, a fedora.
Smoke them if you got them.
I guess so. And a sword cane, whatever that is. You know what a sword cane is?
Yeah, I know what a sword cane is.
And a loaded .38 revolver. So maybe
well,
paranoid.
If it's not St. Peter, I mean,
I guess not.
take them out.
Right. Could be tricked, I suppose. Now, Old Blue Eyes, the legendary actor and singer Frank Sinatra. He died in 1998. While living, Frank was never seen without his Camel cigarettes and his Jack Daniels whiskey. So, of course, he was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a pack of Campbell's and a Zippo lighter. But what wasn't visible to onlookers was that Old Blue Eyes was also buried with a pocket full of dimes. In real life, he always carried dimes with him in case he needed to use a payphone. Now, Frank, of course, lived in the days before cell phones. And the origin of this habit, now I had never heard of this. My wife had, but I was unaware of this. But in 1963, his son, Frank Sinatra Jr., was actually kidnapped.
I did know about that.
And
I knew about that.
Only returned after his father paid a ransom.
Mm-hmm.
It was at that time that he made sure that he and all of his family members traveled with plenty of change in case they needed to make a call.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we'll kind of shift to some unusual coffins here and unusual funerals as well. The godfather of soul, James Brown. He died on Christmas Day in 2006. The day before, he told his doctors, "I don't feel good."
Oh, God.
Or maybe it's...
You made that up, didn't you?
Too soon? Well, it could have happened. It could have happened. Anyway, Brown had not one, not two, but 3 funeral services, and they were all elaborate. The first was held in the famous Apollo Theater in Harlem. His body was driven to the theater in a white glass-encased horse-drawn carriage. The second ceremony was at the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia, and the third was in North Augusta, South Carolina, his final resting place. He was buried in a promethium casket, which is bronze polished to a golden shine, and true to his performance nature, he underwent numerous costume changes during each ceremony.
That's great.
Now, you might not have ever heard of Willie McCoy, but I bet you have heard his voice. He provided the bass solo for the oft-heard Chili's commercial about baby back ribs.
Great. Now that's going to be stuck in my head.
That one.
Yeah.
Well, when he passed away, his body was interred in a custom-built coffin shaped like a rib smoker.
At least it wasn't a chili.
Oh, my gosh. Because of that, because of his job in that commercial, that one commercial, that's interesting.
And the pastor wore a chef's hat, and there were even live pigs at the ceremony. So
that's dedication to a theme.
Really, for sure. And speaking of that, like Willie McCoy, you most likely haven't heard of Frederick J. Bauer, but you definitely have seen and most likely tasted his work. Bauer worked for Cincinnati-based Procter & Gamble. In the 1970s, he developed a new way to create and store potato chips. Originally known as Pringles Newfangled Potato Chips, Bauer's invention quickly caught on and sold millions of units. He held the packaging patent for the Pringles can. Bauer died in 2008, and, according to his wishes...
Was he Pringled?
He was.
Oh.
His remains were cremated, and his ashes were buried in, you guessed it, a Pringles can.
Question.
Yes?
Which can?
Well,
was it the regular or?
The family had some discussion about that. But they finally went with the original.
The original. That's right. I'd read that before, and yeah.
So that's what you call really getting into your product. Now
you're one with it.
here's an odd little side note. You might, if you look at the mascot for Pringles, well, it was a rumor that the mascot was based off, basically, but the mascot's name is Julius Pringles, by the way, in case you're getting into a trivia question. But it was based off of the infamous serial killer Dr. H.H. Holmes. If you ever read The Devil in the White City, what a really great book that is.
Larson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, while both do sport bottle brush mustaches, there's no known connection between the two.
Right. It's a rumor. It's an urban legend, but
they do kind of look alike.
They just look like dapper men.
Yes, with big
Not
bald
men,
heads,
dapper.
bald heads, and big mustaches.
Okay, so let's explore some unusual cemeteries.
All right.
Steve, you talked about in one of our past episodes, you talked about being buried underwater and that thing. Okay, so there is actually a cemetery just for that. It's called Neptune Memorial.
Oh, good.
This sounds like the burial place for mer people.
Okay.
but it's fitting because it's an underwater cemetery located at 40 feet below the surface, about 3 miles off the coast of Key Biscayne in Miami.
Okay.
The undersea cemetery was designed by Florida artist Kim Brandell and opened in 2007. It contains everything you would normally expect to see in a cemetery: stone roads, gates, columns, and beautiful architecture built to withstand the watery environment.
So the way that there's roads and stuff in there?
Yes, there absolutely are. And I even saw like a stone lion. I mean, it's beautiful. Quoting Atlas Obscura, created remains are cast into concrete memorials and placed within the sunken necropolis, where divers can explore or visit with loved ones. Shipwreck diver Bert Kilbride, once listed as the oldest living scuba diver in the Guinness Book of World Records, is interred here with a place of honor at the top of one of the entry columns at the reef gate.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. Many small family cemeteries that were originally located in the middle of farmland have eventually become moved, paved over, or even built over.
Right. I know of one.
There's the Boager Cemetery in Lombard, Illinois. It lies in the parking lot of a huge mall that opened in 1968. But the cemetery was used by families whose ancestors first settled in the area until the 1980s. So a fence surrounds the cemetery, separating it from the rest of the parking lot.
Right.
And in North Carolina, there's a graveyard and a parking lot at Duke University.
Okay.
In Louisville, Kentucky, 5 members of the Burks family were buried on their farm in the 1840s and 50s. The farm is gone, and their small plot is now surrounded by a mall parking lot.
All right.
So there's one such cemetery near us that's actually tucked between a freeway and its feeder road.
I have seen this one.
Yep.
I've been to it. So located in Spring, Texas, the Wunsch, I think that's how you pronounce it, Wunchy?
Winchy.
I think it's Wunchy.
Yeah, Winchy.
Family cemetery has a handful of tombstones dating back from 1885 to 1959, as late as 1959. Right. The German immigrant family left Saxony in the 1840s to settle in what is now Old Town Spring, which is a really cute area. It's just this little town of shops and boutiques and they became prosperous off the cotton industry and built a saloon and hotel that is now called the Winchy Brothers Cafe and Saloon. The original building survived a 2015 fire and is still in operation as a restaurant. It's considered to be very haunted. So back to the cemetery.
The cemetery is between the right lane and the feeder road, or we call it feeder road here in Texas. They're access roads.
The access road. Okay. So if you're on the freeway, you can drive right past it and not see it because the freeway is a little bit elevated above it. Right. But the feeder road, it's right in there. And among the tombstones is the grave of Olena Winchy, who was murdered in 1929. The 21-year-old woman disappeared one day, and when her body was eventually found, it turned out that she had been shot in the back. Her boyfriend's dead body was found on the opposite side of town. And I got my information from Houston Press. But talking about that, there is a geocache there for you guys. There is a geocache there, which reminds me, I need to tell you guys that one of my friends that I met through podcasting, Amy Tilk, has a podcast called Geocache Adventures. And she's also goes by Shadow Dragon 1, which is her geocache name. She has an episode out about geocaching in cemeteries, and she interviewed me. So it dropped on October 20th, so go check that out.
Nice. Okay. What's the name of the podcast again?
It's called Geocache Adventures.
All right. That sounds like fun. You know, you were talking about the cemeteries. In my hometown, there is an old cemetery like that that's now in the parking lot between Walmart and Discount Tire. It's just a little fenced-off area.
Yeah.
Old family cemetery.
Okay, so one last story before we finish. Stephen Hawking. When Stephen Hawking passed away in 2018, his 3 children offered 1,000 tickets for the public to attend his funeral. So when you went online to purchase a ticket, you had to provide a birth date. In the drop-down box for the year of your birth, the choice extended all the way to the year 2038.
2038, okay.
That wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. People who weren't even born yet were given the opportunity to mourn the famed physicist.
Uh-huh.
When asked about it, the Stephen Hawking Foundation admitted that they were inviting unborn humans. Hawking was a strong believer in time travel.
Okay.
And he even hosted a party once inviting all time travelers to show up. The cocktail party was thrown on June 20th, 2009 in Cambridge. Hawking sat underneath a banner that read, "Welcome, Time Travelers."
Uh-huh.
Phil's looking at me like, are you kidding me?
I wish I was there.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to it.
But here's the thing.
I'll be right over.
Nobody showed up.
Oh.
But invitations were not revealed until after the party. So if anyone had shown up, they would have been time travelers.
Yeah.
And it would have been proof of time travel. According to Atlas Obscura, the event was at least partly a stunt for a television show, the sort of combination of serious and silly that Hawking was known for.
See. Okay.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
All right. Trivia challenge. You know the rules. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post. And why wouldn't you like it?
Exactly.
Put your answer to the trivia challenge question in the comments of that post. The first person to do all that will be the winner and will be mentioned in an upcoming episode of Remnant Stew. So, What's our question today, Leah?
Okay, so from Harbin Gold, where in the world is it customary to be buried in coffins shaped like fish, shoes, cars, or other weird objects?
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Remnant Stew is created by me, Leah Lamp. Dr. Judy Meeker and I research, write, and host each episode, along with commentary and dad jokes by Philip Sinquefield.
Woo-hoo.
Our audio is also produced by Phil. Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod, with a voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks to Judy Meeker and Harbin Gold. You can connect with us through our Facebook and Instagram, and if you have an idea you'd like to hear us cover in a future episode, email us a suggestion at staycurious@remnantstew.com.
Well, now, before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. It means the world to us. We love seeing those reviews. Share Remnant Stew with your friend, your family, your funeral director, and that weird guy from high school that always dressed in black. Until the next time, remember to choose to be kind and always stay curious.